Wow. Jonathan Smith, do you really want to follow that? No, you don't, but you're gonna. This gentleman that I'm about to introduce you to is the Senior Chief Deputy Director, come on up, sure, of the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and in that role, he works to advance the strategic goals and vision for Michigan's economic future. He first joined the department as the Chief of Staff in 2020, playing an integral role in a wide variety of projects and initiatives critical to our mission. And with that as a backdrop, he's going to provide a little overview of some very important things before he brings his panel up. Go, sir.
Thank you. I mean, wow. I think we have to start by thanking Governor Whitmer for her leadership in not just creating the My Healthy Climate plan, but helping pass clean energy legislation, but also for her passion for making sure that workers here in Michigan can benefit from the clean energy transition. And when Corey and Kara told me that I had this time slot, I couldn't tell whether that meant they liked me or didn't like me, because that's a tough act to follow. But I'm Jonathan Smith. I'm with the Senior Chief Deputy Director at the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and I first want to start by just thanking all of you. I'm here today to talk about the work that we've been doing to launch the Community and Worker Economic Transition Office, but that work wouldn't be happening if it weren't for the folks in this room. The work you did to help pass the clean energy law last year created this office, and so thank you. I feel incredibly lucky that I get to help build on what you all accomplished. And I want to talk to you about why I'm excited, because what we're doing here in Michigan is very, very unique, both in the scope of this office and also in its ambition. Other states have created these clean offices that focus on just transition, but those offices have had a much narrower focus. They're usually trying to mitigate some of the harm that might come to communities as coal plants are shut down. What makes the Michigan approach different is that in addition to looking at the risks in clean energy transition for our utility industry, we actually are given the task of thinking about transitions in our state's largest and most important sector, the auto industry. And we're not just looking to address some of the negative impacts of economic change. Our strategy in Michigan is we want to help position our communities, our workers, our employers to really benefit from the opportunity that's going to be created by the adoption of new clean energy technology. Our strategy is to leverage Michigan's leadership on climate and energy to grow the state's economy, to grow the state's population, and address income inequality. This is really important because we know here in Michigan that the benefits of economic change have not always been distributed equitably. In a few minutes, I'm going to bring up a panel, and you're going to hear more about how economic change has impacted these communities like Saginaw and Detroit and Monroe in the past. They'll tell you firsthand that the communities and workers who've been most exposed to the risk of a shifting economy, they haven't always had the opportunity to participate in the growth. Now, the good news is, as Michigan leads the world in the shift to clean energy technology, we have an opportunity to put our communities and our workers first in line for new jobs and new investment in this growing economy. So how do we do that? In the years and the decades to come, the shift away from carbon is going to create an unprecedented demand for energy equipment and energy technology. From the investments our utilities are going to make in wind, in solar, in battery storage, and increased distribution capacity, the investments that our largest users of energy are going to make in taking carbon out of the manufacturing process and increasing the efficiency of their operations, to investments that we're all going to make in things like rooftop solar and home heat pumps and EV chargers. Without a clear strategy, it's very likely that a lot of the technology that gets deployed here in Michigan, it's going to be built with cheap labor in another country, in another state, that doesn't have the same commitment to having a clean energy grid that we have. So a better outcome is, let's make a connection between the consumer demand that we're going to create by investing in renewable energy to the manufacturing capacity that already exists here in this state. We can help a company that is making a fuel injector today retool and make heat pumps tomorrow. We can shore up our existing manufacturing base. We can diversify the state's economy so we're no longer so exposed to the ups and downs of the auto sector. And because Michigan is making this transition to renewable energy first, we can position our state to be the supply chain for every other state and every other country that's going to follow us in this transition to clean energy. So manufacturing equipment that exists today, that's going to create and save some good jobs. It's going to make our manufacturers more resilient, but that's just a first step. The real transformative opportunity that we have here in Michigan is that we can tap into our world-class research universities, our deep pools of engineering talent, and our expertise in advanced precision manufacturing. We can research and develop the next generation of technologies. We can export those things around the world, and we can develop the knowledge of how to integrate them into existing infrastructure, how to deploy them with equity, how to build workforce around them. If we do that, we can create a vibrant and thriving knowledge economy around advanced energy that's going to drive growth in our state for the next century the same way that the automotive industry drove growth in our economy over the last century. We can make Michigan the best place in the world to move to if you're a young person who wants to work in the tech sector and actually help solve global climate change. So I know a lot of folks in this room are here because you are passionate about energy, you're passionate about solving global climate change. And what I'm describing, this might sound hard. It might sound like a distraction from our goal of transitioning to a clean energy grid. And I know that transition, it's going to be hard even if we just take the easy path and we get equipment and technology from the cheapest source as quickly as possible. But this isn't just the right thing to do for the economy, it's actually the right thing to do because demonstrating that our climate leadership is going to benefit communities, workers, and employers across Michigan, that's what allows us to expand the coalition of folks who support clean energy, which makes it more likely that we stay the course and we actually meet our clean energy goals. That's the benefit of this approach. If we combine our energy, our environment, our economic, and our equity goals, we make it clear they aren't in competition with one another. We actually make it more likely that we achieve all of those goals. So once again, I want to say thank you to the people in this room. The advocacy and leadership that you've all shown has made Michigan a stronger and more resilient state. And next, I'm going to call up an amazing panel of folks that are going to talk more about the work that this office can do to help communities and workers and companies around the state. We've got a great panel. We're going to start with Mike Bosanac, who's the Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, Justin Pomerville, the Business Manager of UA Local 85, Carla Walker-Miller, who's the CEO of Walker-Miller Energy Services, and Ann Wilson, the Executive Vice President of Government Affairs for MEMA, the Auto Parts Supplier Trade Association.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this panel. I'm really excited to talk to all of you today. Carla, I'm going to start with you. You've said before that in today's world, every part of the economy is the energy economy. Why do you think that Michigan can benefit from being a leader on clean energy, and how can we make sure that those growth opportunities are distributed equitably?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me on this panel. I really want to thank Governor Whitmer and the Biden administration because they really have set up a construct by which every part of the economy is going to become a clean energy economy. And when we think about how every building needs to be retrofitted, all industries need to be evaluated, we need to look at our homes, we need to look at how we're manufacturing, what we're manufacturing, why we're manufacturing, and how all of that energy is being generated and distributed to our needs, then every job needs to be reevaluated for the fit and how we can fight climate change, the existential issue of our day. One of the interesting things to me is that one of the reasons it's so important is that it is an unprecedented amount of investments. And it is the first economic revolution that is centered in equity and justice. I'm still having trouble believing that. And one of the things I really want to make sure we understand that it's centered in humanity. So we're not just talking about manufacturing, we're not talking about just jobs or businesses. We really are talking about people. And now that I'm hearing equity and justice so much, I really want to help us to center on the fact that this is not just a racial or an ethnic construct. As people, there are the spectrum of people need to have a part of this revolution. And there's a tool that I would, just as a teaching moment, a tool that I recently came across, and it's called the Wheel of Power. The Wheel of Power. And it addresses who we are. And it starts with the center of the wheel, which are the people in this country who are the most powerful. And those are people who are able-bodied, affluent, who are educated, who own homes, who are English-speaking, who are citizens, who have the easiest access to all the benefits. And the spectrum goes up to the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable of us, oh, I'm sorry, you guys are shocked because I didn't say male and white, okay? And I think it's interesting that I didn't say male and white, because male and white are the things that we focus on the most, right? But there are so many other things that give people access to the benefits. The other side of the spectrum is people who are darker skinned, people who are not originally from this country, people who have disabilities, believe it or not, people who have larger bodies. People who have larger bodies. Think of how we look at people. People who don't have access, natural access or organic ties to the benefits. People living with disabilities, people who are either neurodiverse, people who really don't get invited. People who don't get invited to speak on panels, but people who have all kinds of challenges. And one of the things I really want us to focus on is, as we talk about communities and communities of people, and we talk about equity, let's not just take the easy people that we talk about all the time. There's so much work to be done, and someone has to focus on the hardest people, the people who are not engaged, who are never engaged, people that just aren't on the tip of our tongues or top of mind.
Absolutely, making sure that everyone in the state, everyone in the country is able to access the benefits of what we're going to accomplish here in the decades to come. That's our task, right? The Economic Transition Office has now held 9 community roundtables around the state of Michigan. And in every community that we have visited, it's been really clear that most regions, they have a vision for their future. That vision usually leverages a unique asset or strength that community has. Mike, can you talk to folks a little bit about the plan that you've helped develop for Monroe County? And can you talk about why it's important for the Transition Office that we help communities design and implement their own stabilization and growth plans rather than trying to impose a state plan on every community?
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. I think first I need to tell you that I come from a community that is kind of the power generation base in the state of Michigan. About 20 years ago, we had 3 electric generating plants. In our future, we'll have 1, which will be a nuclear power plant. And so, the first closing of the coal plant was, I think, kind of that punch in the gut that people weren't expecting, hit the community hard, one of the cities where the plant was located in. I think what we're trying to focus our efforts on is that when future shocks come to our community, they're not that punch in the gut that kind of just, they hit and they kind of graze off, and we can keep going from there. So to your question, I see a lot of similarities in the work that you're doing in your office and our community, and that is an approach to be proactive and not just take things as they come. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is create that shock absorber, if you will, when plant closings come or they scale down. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just in the energy sector. It can be any sector, and I know the panelists are going to talk about automotive as well, and there's going to be a transition and a significant change that's occurring there. And so what we're trying to do in our community, and that's kind of the message to others, is create these shock absorbers. And what are shock absorbers in our view? Well, first for us, it's working closely with our utility partners. If you're in the automotive industry, you'd certainly want to be working with trade associations and companies in your community. When we're working with our utility partners, yes, they have an IRP, integrated resource plan, but we're talking to them a little bit closer about, the impact of that, what else is on the horizon, so that we're prepared for that and we can transition as we see fit. The second part of that is really just building a resilient economy, one that has, I call them ladders to success, where you have multiple markets that are available, multiple employment opportunities, and you can advance up through your local economy. And then you can withstand those impacts. The third thing, and the point I want to make, is rear view mirrors are smaller by design, right? You can't keep looking back. You have to almost sometimes forget about the past. You have to focus on the future. And that's really what our strategic economic development plan is. It's focused on how do we create those opportunities for our citizens. Oftentimes I'll hear leaders talk about, well, the tax base that is coming, or it's focused only on those public sector revenues. And certainly as a CFO, that's an important part of my job. But I try to move the conversation back to just, we're trying to create opportunities for our citizens. The other things that will benefit will flow after that, but our first focus is creating those opportunities. Now, as it applies to the Economic Transition Office, I guess I'd call our strategy that growth strategy, and you talked about, you went around the state and visited with a number of different communities. I think you found out that Monroe's not like Saginaw, and Monroe's not like others, and I think our plan focuses on our strengths, our assets. Now, we don't have a research university in our community, and so we're not really focused on creating a plan where we have a goal that, we're going to be a biotech corridor. That's not what we're going to be. We have a really good community college. We have a really good skilled trades workforce, and so that's going to be our focus, something that's achievable and it's realistic. And I would encourage any community out there, when you're building your local economy, and whether you're going through an energy transition, EV marketplace, there's a whole bunch of other market factors at play that are going to force change. You just want to have that plan in place, ready to go. The other thing is, I don't expect you or your team to come to Monroe and fix our problem for us.
Thank you.
I like the state, we have a good working relationship, but a one-size-fits-all just isn't going to get it done. And the other part of that is, when we create our plan and we've got sweat equity into it, our own finances, we own it, not you. And so when you leave, we're going to be there. We have to work that plan. We're the face when investors come to our community. Have we done what we need to do? Are we putting our best foot forward? And so I don't expect the state to step in. What I expect the state to do is, provide some of that assistance, help us get to where we need to be. You don't have to lift everything for us, but just give us a hand on a few things. And then the last point is, in my bio, I have a background. I'm a risk manager from, we have the largest property and liability pool in Michigan. I think there's a risk for any community to just sit back and let things come to you. The governor talked about being forward-looking, optimistic. Go grab those opportunities. Sure as we're sitting here, if any community sits back and waits for things to come, somebody else is going to control your destiny. Go out and create your own future, and I think you're going to like that more than having somebody else define that. So a little bit of our story and kind of where we see the transition office going forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was really amazing being able to do so many community roundtables. We plan to keep doing them, maybe a slightly less frequent basis moving forward. We did, I think, 8 in about a month, 2 a day most days, and it was a lot of work. But we learned a ton, and got to interact with a lot of folks. Carla, to your point, that aren't necessarily invited to come to conferences like this, or that know how to drive down to Lansing and have a meeting with the folks in state government. And it was really great to see all the different communities in the way that they were all sort of approaching their future very differently. We did put out a report, thanks to Kate Bell on our team, who did a lot of the work on this. We summarized a lot of what we learned, and it's on our website. If you Google it, there's a very long URL that I won't try to remember, but if you Google the Michigan Department, our department in the Economic Transition Office, you'll find it there. It's a pretty short read, but it talks a little bit about some of the key themes and then gives a bit of a spotlight on each of the communities and something unique about it, including a link to the Link 2.0 plan that Monroe County has developed, which would encourage everybody to take a look at, because it is an incredibly thoughtful document that shows the hard work that they've done to think about, what the strengths of their community are and how they could move that community forward in the future. And I think the hope is that the transition office is going to be a partner in that, to be able to provide access to data or enhance capacity, either to create and refine that plan or to implement it. But it's got to start with a local plan. And Justin, when we visited you in Saginaw, we discussed some of the ways that economic change in the past has impacted communities like yours. We talked about clean energy transitions in the auto and utility sectors and how they're going to happen over a much longer time frame than some of the change that's happened in the past, which has oftentimes occurred real suddenly and not necessarily with as much warning or foresight. So would love to just hear from you. What are some of the ways that you think this office can help communities like Saginaw benefit from clean energy transitions?
Sure, I appreciate being here. I appreciate you inviting me, Jonathan, and Governor Whitmer's foresight and leadership has been amazing for the area I represent. I live in Saginaw. I represent the northern 29 and a half counties in the state of Michigan for the union plumbers, steam fitters, and HVACR service technicians. And the big complaint I had when the transition team came in is, where were you 20 years ago? Because we've been living this kind of the land of misfit toys for a while now. And now you heard Governor Whitmer's report. Two of those projects that she mentioned that were the 1,100 jobs of Corning is in Hemlock, right across from Hemlock Semiconductor in the clean energy sector, that is going to be built by skilled craftspeople, and it changes the whole dynamics of the whole county. The other project that she mentioned was an SK Siltron project, making the wafer chips, and these have dramatically changed the dynamics of Saginaw, Bay City, Midland area, to the fact where Saginaw got to the point where we were number 2 or number 3 in the state in violent crime. And I've explained this to our economical development groups there, that it's not that we have a violent community, it's that when you take the good paying jobs away and these people can't get out, you can't starve a wild animal to eat out of the dumpster, and they start taking from their neighbor and they want the good paying jobs. They want the ability to go out and earn, and they're proud of that. And it's a very proud community that I grew up in. I'm very proud of the community that I live in, and it's a very diverse community, and it got to the point where 18,000 jobs that were at steering gear got down to 1,800, and it wasn't being replaced with anything. So the transition was needed to happen. The transition team, the foresight to make the transition team excited me. The area I represent, there's one place in the state of Michigan that you can bring a 1,000-foot freighter in from Europe in 10 miles inland, and that's in through the Saginaw Bay up the Saginaw River. And I know that's not the greenest way, but to get this established and these plants up and running and to build, it's just been truly a godsend to have the leadership that we have in the Biden-Harris administration and the dollars that have been provided to transition, because we all knew it wasn't going to be cheap and nobody really knew how. And now the money's being invested into the sectors that it needs to be, and it's changed the neighborhoods that I represent. It's changed the people's perspectives. The crime has gone down. There's good paying jobs coming, and many of them are in the clean energy sector. It's, Northern Michigan is proud of clean energy. We're proud of the environment. I tell people all the time that the building trades probably represents the biggest group of conservationists in the state of Michigan, because they probably buy more DNR licensing than anybody else, because they all hunt, they all fish, they all have a boat, they all have an ORV. And so they want a clean environment just as much as anybody else. But there also has to be a transition of how you get there. It can't just be to shut the switch off and now these good paying jobs go away. And now we're actually seeing the fruits of that labor from Leo, and from the governor's administration and from the president's administration, to where these good paying jobs are there and they can transition in to continue to provide for their family, to continue to have the American dream of one vacation and a 40-hour work week, and put food on the table. So, you know, it's been a rocky road or a bumpy road in the energy transition, because we also have coal-fired power plants that are slated to close, and the Carn-Weedock is a consumer's energy site that's they've already demoed the Weedock. They're down to 1 unit or 2 units at Carn 3 and 4, and it'll be gone in the next couple of years. And my people used to work over 100,000 man hours a year inside that plant alone. But now we're seeing the Corning investment into the you know, the silica world and the Hemlock semiconductors. So the transition team has been highly beneficial to my members, and like I said, the only complaint I had when they came and they took the abuse was I needed you 15 years ago. We went through a rocky road, and now we're at, to be honest with you, most of the building trades are at a full employment of members and actively seeking people. And these are good paying jobs with a retirement and with health care. And it's strictly and solely because of the education portion, the money that's been invested, the dedication from Governor Whitmer and her team and Leo to come to the community and even explain it, what's coming, what's available. So the education portion's been big, and the fact that it's been focused on each individual community. I appreciate what you said with the Monroe area being different than the Saginaw area, and Leo went to every area and sector and met with the groups to find out how they differed, and I hadn't seen that before. I'm a younger business manager in the United Association, but I've been in office since 2011, and I hadn't had anybody come knock on my door and say, what do you need? And they came and said, what do you need? And as we talked about it, it's like, hey, we see that, and now we're training for the future. We have training centers that are self-funded. We don't get any grant money or state money, and we provide training to these apprentices. Tell us what you want us to train them on. What's going to be available? We'll train them, and that's what we're working steadily with, and it's providing a path to success from the trade standpoint. And I couldn't be happier to be up here, and couldn't be more grateful to Leo and the governor and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration.
Well, number one, you know, this is a big job, right? Getting our state to a position where we're really growing our economy and growing our population and really, you know, taking advantage of this opportunity. You know, it's going to take all of us, and so you know, we've got to come and meet you all where you are, and we've got to kind of hear what you're working on and what your strengths are, because you know, again, like if this was just a state problem to solve, it'd probably be impossible. But the good news here is, like, we have all these partners in the room. We have all these amazing partners in all these communities that we met through these roundtables, and we'll continue to meet moving forward. And, you know, we all working together. That's how we move these things forward. So, you know, and you're the honorary Michigander here on our panel today. You know, Justin was talking about some of the tougher transitions we've had in this state over, you know, 15, 20 years ago. You represent auto suppliers all over the country, but given, you know, the footprint here in Michigan, a lot of your work is based here, and you've done a lot of work over your career to help Michigan and Michigan companies, you know, make these kinds of transitions, whether it was from you know, the transition out of the Great Recession and the auto crisis, or this ICE to EV transition that we're in today. You know, would love to hear from you. You know, what are some of the pressing issues that our auto suppliers here in Michigan are facing because of these clean energy transitions, and how do you think that the transition office can be you know, a helpful resource for members as they look not just to survive but to really thrive in the years ahead?
Well, first of all, Jonathan, I want to thank you for having me. And I do want to recognize the governor and her entire team. They have really been partners with us here in Michigan, as well as in Washington, trying to get some really necessary programs across the finish line. So you're probably sitting there going, she really isn't from Michigan, and she's representing manufacturers, and we're sitting here talking about justice. And what is she doing here? Well, Jonathan and I have known each other a long time, so I can't let him down. So I'll try to explain where the connection is, and it's there. So we represent motor vehicle suppliers. Suppliers, and since all of you are from Michigan, even cab drivers in Michigan understand what a supplier is. But when I got to MEMA 20 years ago, most members of Congress did not. 70% of the value of a new vehicle is made by the members of our trade association or their competitors someplace. But 65% of our members, and we have about 1,000 members, are small. Now, small manufacturers are not like small businesses, 150 million or less, and they are dotted throughout the country. A lot of them, and Michael and I were talking about this before lunch, are in small rural communities where you wouldn't think of having a manufacturer, but they've been there for generations, and they are the backbone of that community, oftentimes providing jobs that other businesses, other parts of the community really depend on. And I would just tell you that I'm very proud of the industry I represent, but safety and environment are in the DNA of our membership. Because if you look at it, as we expect more out of the vehicles we purchase and the vehicles that are on the road, we expect more coming off the lot. And that means that vehicle manufacturers expect more from their suppliers. But suppliers have not really benefited during COVID and during the chips crisis the way you saw vehicle manufacturers. There was a lot of press about the new profits and things like that. And Jonathan's heard my analogy. We're kind of like the peanut butter in the sandwich, because suppliers only get paid when a vehicle gets sold or their component gets sold. So they can't really say, well, let's buy, I'll make more money even though we sell fewer vehicles, but they're more expensive vehicles. That doesn't help the supply base. So we really came out of COVID and out of the chips crisis, and particularly our smaller members, in a very, very fragile state. And what we've been able to do, again, with the Biden administration, with the help of Congress, the Inflation Reduction Act, with the help of people like Jonathan, is really look at a couple of things. One is our folks need to retool and convert to meet the needs of zero-emission vehicles. And we don't call it BEVs, we call it zero-emission. Some people it's going to be clean hydrogen, some people it's going to be plug-in hybrids. It's going to be a variety of different things, particularly, I like your Power Wheel. The price of a vehicle is $55,000, $60,000 a year. Now, I'm old and I'm about to retire, but my first house wasn't a whole lot more than that. So most Americans are having a hard time seeing how they're going to be able to afford individual transportation. So we need to make sure that these suppliers can continue to provide materials for ICE vehicles at the same time they make this transition. The other thing that we need to do, and I think we've been hearing this up and down the panel, is the workforce. One of the things that our members have said nationwide, but in Michigan, is workforce and workforce development is key to their continuing to be able to thrive in a state. So we need more workers in the state. We need them to be trained in the state. And one of the things that President Biden just announced was a workforce hub in Detroit, specifically to train and retrain people to be in the workforce and be at the facilities. Now, let me say this again. We represent 900,000 jobs in the United States. Someplace between, my number says 75,000, Jonathan's number says 85,000, but about that in Michigan. So everybody in this room, as I could say about my Southern husband, cannot swing a dead cat without figuring out somebody who doesn't work for a supplier, in your family or your friends or your neighbors or something like that. And you want those jobs to stay in your community. So what we need to do is make the best use of this workforce hub, bring in new people, because our members are going to homeless shelters, they're going to the unemployed, they're going to the disabled to try to bring new workers in. Let's figure out how, with automation, there's a lot of people who could work in a factory floor and manufacturing who've never been able to do it before. Let's bring those people in. And the last thing I would say to you is, If you're in a community and you're sitting here thinking, this woman has 3 heads and she's absolutely out of her mind, that's distinctly possible. But if you've got suppliers in your community and you would like to sit down with them and figure out how they can help you through this transition and what they can give to you and what they need from you, give me a call. I will help find those suppliers, and I will see if we can put together those kinds of roundtables. And my phone number is 202-320-7293. Jonathan has me on speed dial, so he can find me. But I'm very serious about this, because this transition, we're going to leave people in the wake if we're not careful. And we're going to leave communities in the wake. And this is not something this state wants to do, and that's not something this industry wants to do. We need to do this rising tide lifts all boats, and we need the investment, the grants, the workforce, and the communities to be all behind it.
Jonathan, if I may, your point about bringing new people in is so important, and in 2 ways. So we look at the labor participation rate in the state and in the country. We have unprecedented labor participation. We brag in Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland counties. It's 70% higher than 70% on average. But what that doesn't account for is the people who have stopped looking, who are totally disconnected from the labor force. And therein lies the magic of really what we have an opportunity to do. And many of those people are going to be on the most vulnerable parts of that power wheel that I talked about. So equitable engagement is so important. The other thing, though, is that there is this healthy tension and a necessary tension between making sure that manufacturers who have been in the automotive industry, some for nearly 100 years, and who have created generational wealth for their families and wealth in their communities, we need to make sure they're okay. But we also have to make opportunity for those who have not been able to participate as business owners. We were not at the table. You know, we have not had organic ties, Black people, brown people, disconnected communities, organic ties that allowed us to figure out what widget would make the automobile perform better. So we absolutely have to make sure there are opportunities for business expansions, entrepreneurship and innovation, and new businesses in these communities. Jobs are amazing, but the average Black worker, the average Black business owner in this country has about 12 times the median net worth of the average Black worker. So if we're trying to change communities, then we need more owners, and owners who are diverse are more likely to hire from communities who are diverse. So we can do a lot of things at one time, and we have to.
Yeah, and I would say, no, I think Carla's right. And keep in mind, this transition is going to need new innovation. It is not going to be able to rely on yesterday's or even today's. It's not going to work. And so when you talk to some of our CEOs, and they are primarily white, male, but what they talk about is not just their existing supply chain, but the new supply chain that they need to bring in. And again, I would say this is a conversation that I would love to use, you know, where I sit, where I stand, to help that in your community back and forth. Realize also what the president did on Tuesday by announcing these tariffs on just this wide range of, you know, electric vehicles, battery components, things like that. What the president is really saying here, folks, is we've got to make it in the U.S. Well, right now, we don't have the capacity to make what we need in the U.S. for, you know, what the president's dream is for zero-emission vehicles. And therein lies an opportunity for growth that we all have to explore.
So I was just going to comment on I look at things through kind of that pure economic lens, and to the earlier point, Ann, that you were making about the struggles of the suppliers into the automotive industry. You know, to me, that's blocking and tackling of economic development, which is really the retention side. You can go out and we can talk about growth strategies and bringing in new investment, but the folks who are there, the businesses who are there, I mean, you got to protect your backside. And so, our Michigan Works offices do a really good job of connecting with businesses, but you don't want to hear about a business that's going to leave or it's going to close after they've already come to that decision. We need to be engaging with them. How can we help them if they're struggling? The GoPro talent grants, there's a number of other opportunities out there. It's our jobs as leaders to provide information and resources and put them in front of them and make sure that we're connecting with them. And if they need to expand, that's great. How can we help them do that? And so this engagement has to be constant. And to Carla, your point, that's where some of these economic development strategies, the micro businesses, the entrepreneurship, that's where they need help. There's a lot of great ideas out there. They just need that, I don't know if I want to call it incubator, but they need support. They need some of that help to get them off the ground and make sure that, hey, they can ride that bike down the road without the training wheels. And so those are great opportunities where you get that growth and that organic growth within our state.
Yeah. This is a great conversation. I'm really excited by a lot of what you all are talking about. It's so close to the work that we do at Leo, whether it's on the workforce side or supporting existing employers and also helping new employers get up and running. So just two things really quickly. One, Ann, you mentioned some of the recent federal announcements, and those have been really exciting. The Vice President was here a couple of weeks ago. They announced, Biden-Harris administration announced not just a new EV workforce hub here in Michigan that's going to help us collaborate statewide and generate more pathways for folks to get into these good-paying manufacturing jobs in the future. They announced $100 million in new support for manufacturing. A lot of that money, not all of it, but we're going to try to get as much as we can. We'll come here to Michigan. Some new SBA programs and for small business lending, and a lot of things. We're getting a lot of strong partnership from the Biden-Harris administration right now on in support of state strategies. We talk with them regularly, let them know, here's what we're seeing, here's what we need, here's where we don't have a state program that can solve this problem, and they've been very quick to come in and partner and try to launch things that they know meet our strategic goals, because I think there's just a real strong recognition that a strong America requires a strong manufacturing economy. A strong manufacturing economy requires a strong Michigan, and so it's just great to have that kind of partnership. You talked a little bit about the important role that some of these small manufacturers play in a rural community. And, you mentioned a lot of reasons why those employers are important. One you didn't mention is oftentimes that employer is the largest source of revenue for the local government, and can be the largest user of energy for that local utility. So, the downstream impacts of a business failure in a small rural area can be really devastating. And so when we think about this transition, I'm glad you brought that up, because we can't just, I think a lot of times we think about, Southeast Michigan and the 96 corridors is where a lot of that industrial base is, but it really truly is all over the state. And
keep in mind, suppliers employ 3 times as many people as the vehicle manufacturers. We love the vehicle manufacturers. They're all our members' customers. I'm not trying to say that. But there's just more suppliers out there,
right.
3 times the number. So, that supplier who's out there who's got 150 jobs, that could be a really important backbone to a community.
And a lot of times those small communities, small employers, small organizations, one of the things we've heard a lot about, both in roundtables and just every conversation that's come up throughout this conference, is capacity. There have been these huge federal investments, whether it's on the infrastructure side, clean energy, workforce. And a lot of the organizations that we really want to get access to these new tools and these new resources, they're the ones who are oftentimes have the least capacity to go and pursue them. So, Carla, I would love to hear from you. Do you think that, the nonprofits and the businesses and the local communities that you work with, do they have a handle on all the opportunities that are out there and how to go get them?
No.
So what do we need to do? What do we need to
Can we
do?
help fix that? We can help
Yeah.
fix that.
Yeah, it's when you think that we're in a really interesting time right now, because for now that the funding is starting to flow, one of the things that nonprofits, businesses, and communities, I told someone the other day, we're kind of like fish. You know, when you feed fish and everybody just goes to, the fish all go to where the food is dropping, and then the fish go to where you move it. We don't have enough notice, knowledge, information, or access to what is coming to prepare ourselves, our resources, our partnerships, because a lot of the money requires partnerships and encourages partnerships, and will be better spent if we have partnerships. But if we only find out about them when they happen, then we're not putting our best foot forward. We're not thinking about the innovation and the real needs. We're not having conversations and meetings where we are really making the best and highest use of the funding that's coming. So when we talk about equity, one of the things that would make this more equitable would be if there was one place we could all look and we could see and understand, you know, what type of money is coming, what the intent is, what the eligibility requirements are, what's the intent, all of that in one place. And there's a lot of money out here, and I really wish someone would put that together so that businesses, communities, nonprofits, all of us would be able to have the impact, the best impact that we can have. I consider myself fairly well connected, more because I'm old and been out here for a long time fighting this fight, but we still don't know. You know, I still don't understand. I still am, hey, can you look at this? Can you look at that? Can you, you know? And when you repeat that across all the nonprofits, all the businesses, and all the communities, we're wasting a lot of time just trying to see the things that we can't pursue. And by the time we see the things that we can pursue, it's too late. So there needs to be a lot of work done there.
So if that's your motion to put it under the transition office, I support that motion.
Well,
So,
and I would also suggest one thing you need to think about. When I hear from smaller manufacturers, they need help writing grants. Because, I mean, you know, the CEOs, the CFOs, the plant manager, and then you tell him or her they got to write a grant. I mean, it's just, so, you know, if there's ways to help with that, it is an immense need of smaller manufacturers.
One thing I'm really excited about is this just earlier this year, because we've been hearing about this capacity problem, you know, for a while. You know, coming out of COVID, when the first rescue plan dollars started hitting local communities, I mean, we immediately started hearing about the challenges that folks were having, you know, figuring out, you know, what were the most productive ways to spend all these funds, but also dealing with, you know, compliance, administrative burdens, and then, you know, as these grants and tax credits and loans and other things have come online, you know, I've heard from folks it's really tough to track it all. And earlier this year, we partnered with the Michigan Municipal League. We launched a online portal, and for folks who work in local government, it's called myfundinghub.org. And it is a one-stop portal where if you are a township, city, or county government, you can go and use this tool, and you can look up what grants are available, both state and federal. There are some online resources to help you understand how to position yourself to best pursue those grants. And if you're in a Justice 40 community, there's some technical assistance capacity that, you know, can help you actually, you know, pursue a specific grant opportunity. And, you know, not solving all of the problems that you've addressed, Carla, but if there are two critical things I think that were important about it. One is, you know, getting everything in one place, and two was recognizing that, you know, we couldn't build this at the state because, you know, if folks don't know how to find us to ask about grants, they're not going to find our website. That we needed to rely on a partner who already had those relationships, and so, you know, making sure that we were working with somebody like MML who you know, was already a trusted partner for, you know, local government around the state that had partnerships with their county associations and others, you know, being able to recognize that, you know, we need to work through trusted connectors. And so for anybody in this room who thinks that's a great idea and would like to see us be able to expand it to small businesses or nonprofits, you know, we're very excited about the opportunity to expand this portal and its application. But we, you know, in addition to additional funding,
we'd need to make sure we have the right partnerships, because if we're not working through people who have credibility and relationships with these institutions, we're going to be very unlikely that they'll be able to access the resources we want to be able to access. And Michael, for government, I know there's sort of two factors that are impacting capacity. I mean, one is this challenge of just keeping track of all the grants that are available and being able to, have a good grant writer on staff and have all the capacity to do it. But, the other part of it is, communities need flexible dollars. You've got a plan. You need money to implement your plan. And a lot of times when there's grant dollars out there, you've got to sort of figure out, well, how can I make my plan fit in this grant application, right? And so can you just talk about how a more flexible approach to funding would help at the local government level as you're working to implement your Link 2.0 plan?
Sure. We'll go back to what I said earlier. All the communities are a little bit different. They have different assets that they're trying to promote in terms of whether it's a transition challenge or just economic development challenges to get through that. And so, the block grants are preferred for the obvious reason is that they have broad flexibility with them versus the categorical grants. And I think that's where, our own unique approach, we want to be able to fit it in. Saginaw has a port, City of Monroe has a port, but they may have different tracks in terms of where they're going, what they're trying to achieve. And so, to give each community their flexibility to be able to pursue, their strategic vision, I think is really important. Obviously, we're going to get there in different ways, but I think there needs to be this enhanced partnership. Certainly, everybody wants the money to be accountable. I'm all for that. But I think there needs to be that creative flexibility, that innovative path to be able to do things a little bit differently with the money. And the last point on this, and we were touching on it a little bit and maybe skating around it, but what I'm used to hearing is we don't know what we don't know, right? And it doesn't matter what organization, if you're not aware of an opportunity, it's going to go past you. And I think, whether you know about the grant or you don't know about it or what resources are out there, I think that's that partnership that we're looking for. Again, don't need you to do our work for us. Just need to, hey, can you help for a few hours and get us to where we need to be?
Well, Ann talked about how we worked with each other in the past, but before coming back to Michigan, I was in Washington, D.C. for many years. And, when I would meet folks in Washington, D.C., they always thought, they could tell the folks who were Michigan, because we're always talking about how great Michigan is, how much we love Michigan. And I do think that's like one of the things that's so unique about our state. It's why the governor's such a fantastic leader for our state. I mean, she just, her sense of pride in this place is palpable, right? And, I think part of that is just the story that we tell about ourselves. This was the place during the 20th century where people from all over the world could come from, and they knew they could come here because it was a ticket to the middle class. They could get a job that would support their family, and they could, it was a path to prosperity that wasn't available to them in the state or the country that they were living in before they came to Michigan. What's really exciting here is, Michigan's already a leading state when it comes to creating these clean energy jobs. We heard the governor talk about some of the statistics. Justin, how can we make sure that the opportunities that we're creating, that they're open to everybody, and that the jobs that are created are high quality jobs with good wages?
So I think that we're at a pivotal point, or at least in my lifetime, and I'm younger than some, but this is something that's going to be generational if done right, and that's where the transition offices come in, and thankfully, thank God that it is Governor Whitmer here leading us, because the stuff that gets built needs to be utilized properly. And I'm all for the flexibility, as you mentioned, because there are differences, but not everybody's going to spend everything they can get right all the time either. We all know that. There's always mistakes, or somebody saw, things a different way. So I think the investment, and for the purpose of this conference is the clean energy. If you have cheap energy, or you have reasonable energy, manufacturing follows, the auto industry follows, the semiconductor plants follow. I lose plants to the south right now in the Tennessee Valley Authority area, the TVA sector of the world, with the blue oval down there that they're building is in the pipe fitters that are down there. And Michigan I don't want to say lost them because it was never ours to lose, but rightfully it should have went here, in my view, is right, because I'm from here. So it's like, how do we entice these companies to keep building here? The money that we are awarded in these grants and some of the economical development money that's out there, if invested right in the communities, will keep giving long term. And some of the plants that we had long term aren't going to continue to be here. I was walking around before this panel started. We were talking about the Rouge plant. You know, I mean, you're talking about the largest automotive plant that the world had ever known when built, and it's dwindled and dwindled and dwindled and keeps chewing away. And what are we doing to replace it? And I think that comes down to, as we go back to everything in the UA, and as our General President Mark McManus would say, is training's everything, right? We're training for the future. It's the backbone. It's what gets us here. And I kind of will revert back to my first statement of, if we knowingly have all the information on what's coming, we can train for it. And I think the investment needs to be made in that sector to where we have the skilled, qualified workforce. I think to retain the good jobs, Detroit was the automotive capital of the world because there was a lot of hardworking people there. Henry Ford, you know, saw it as and put this in, and that's what Saginaw was built on. We had 4 foundries and steering gear, and it was a good core group of hardworking middle-class people, blue-collar. And when the investment's made in them, they'll make the investment back and into the companies. I'm a little bit different perspective than some, being a labor leader in this room, but it's you invest in the worker and it'll pay dividends, and that pays into the community. But there's also other exponential factors that weigh in on that. You have to have the infrastructure, you have to have the water, you have to have the power, you have to. Hemlock Semiconductor is the largest user or consumer of power in the state of Michigan. Well, we have to be able to provide that power to them at a cheap rate to build cleaner energy. It can't just be a flip of the switch and happen overnight. It has to go as a process, and that's where the transition team and the governor's team is going to be highly critical to my community is how we do invest, because the switch doesn't go off tonight. It has to be planned for, and if we know, we'll plan.
Yeah, and you know, you all have been very, you talked a little bit before about the training programs that you all invest in and the apprenticeship programs, right? And we know that one of the challenges, I mean, you know, Carla, you were talking about we have really low unemployment, but we still have this challenge with folks who are outside the workforce. And a lot of the reason for that is because, you know, if you're a 2-income household or a single family household, you know, can you take time off to go to a training program if you don't have childcare, if you don't have transportation? And you know, these models for workforce training that allow folks to you know, earn a living while they're working and training at the same time helps us, you know, get more folks into the workforce in some of these fields that haven't always been as diverse as we would like. And so thinking about those kinds of how we're making entry and access into these good paying jobs is really critical. And you know, our friends in labor have been a huge part of that, working with organizations like yours to make sure that we're building that kind of programming with new companies that are coming online. It's really critical.
Yeah, I think that as we talk about how important the workforce is, again, we're talking about human beings, right? And one of the things that's interesting is we have people who can't go to an all-day, 8-week, 12-week workforce training because they can't afford not to be paid for 8 weeks or 12 weeks. So I want, again, equity money. One of our best practices for workforce development, if we really are trying to get those most disconnected, is paid training. It is wraparound services. It is access to daycare. I can't pay for 3 children to be in daycare while I take a training class, right? So I have to pay someone to keep my kids while I learn about clean energy or whatever my next thing is. When we talk about equity, we're reaching into communities that have been historically traumatized, to be honest, by some of the things Donna from Eastside Community Network talked about how that community felt when things that harmed the community were placed in their community over and over again, and they couldn't help it. One of the things we offer in our workforce development classes, in addition to paid training, is we have started offering trauma-informed mental health services, because there are things about our lived experiences that create barriers in our spirits and our hearts that make it less likely that we're going to be successful even after we are trained. So we have to continually evolve those models so that we can reach those who are most disconnected and have the biggest impact on every good thing we're trying to do.
Well, I think we're getting very close to time here, and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for our keynote speaker, who I'm very excited to hear from. But before we go, maybe just a quick lightning round, quick answers here. As we look out towards our 2040 clean energy goal, what's one other thing that you will hope we have accomplished by 2040? And I'll start with you.
You would start with me. I hope we find a transportation sector that can meet people, not just where they are right now, but in the future. Whether it's mass transportation, whether it's individual transportation, shared transportation, whether it's for people who are disabled, automated transportation, or as they get elderly, but we also have to do it in a safe and energy efficient way. And that is a massive undertaking. But by 2040, you should not be restricted from applying for a job if you live in downtown Detroit because it's out in Auburn Hills. We should have ways to get workers to those places. You shouldn't be restricted to getting to good health care because you don't drive anymore. We should be taking transportation seriously enough that it helps people. It goes back to the core reason why Henry Ford did what he did and why people embraced that. Awesome. That wasn't a lightning round, I apologize.
It's okay. Carla?
I'm going to try to be a little fast, but I'm hoping that we can retire the phrases clean energy and the focus on equity. By that time, I'm hoping, when I first started buying gas, I had to choose between leaded and unleaded. Anybody had to choose between leaded and unleaded? We don't talk about leaded gas anymore. It's just not a thing. And I'm hoping that by 2040, clean energy won't be a thing because energy will be clean energy, and that equity will be so ingrained in the way we operate that we won't be talking about it at all either.
That's a tough one to follow, obviously. That's a great answer. And by 2040, I think, I guess my hope would be mimicking both of those, of course. The third thing being everybody has access to the education and access to the training that they need. I think coming from the training world, and I wanted to chime in just briefly when you said that about paid training, is there's 1,000 apprentices in the UA in the state of Michigan, and they're all paid to train for 5 years. There's 13,500 union plumbers, steam fitters, and HVAC. They all had an apprenticeship. They learned the whole time. And getting that message out and the branding and the knowledge that there are places you can go and be trained and be paid for it is big for our organization, and that's why we're not running as far behind in the skilled trade shortage as there is globally or nationally. And Michigan has been a leader, in that. And I think having opportunity to education is probably the biggest thing, that there are options. I didn't know there was options in my high school. You had the college path, and that was it. And then when I figured out I couldn't do the college path, then it was apprenticeship. So it was kind of one of those things. But having those options and opportunities would be the biggest thing for 2040 for me.
So 2040, I'm not good in math. What is that, 16 years? That's right around the corner. I guess I'd be looking for just as smooth a transition as we can get from where we're at today in power generation, and I'll just stay focused on that, that we do as little harm as possible to the communities and the workers. I talk about communities, it's really the humans who are part of those communities, that we have a responsibility as leaders to create as many opportunities in this transition for them so that their quality of life, and we talked earlier, who thinks quality of life starts with a good paying job? I certainly do, and I think that's what one of the lofty goals should be, is that we create this transition, that those folks who are caught up in it have opportunities for good paying jobs for their quality of life.
Well, thanks so much for the panel. This has been a fantastic conversation. Really excited to learn from all of you, and excited to continue to partner with you in the years ahead as we look to continue the work of the Transition Office. Thanks again to everybody in the room for all of your advocacy, all of your support, and Look forward to working with everybody in this room as we look to accomplish all of our 2040 goals, our clean energy goals, and all the other amazing goals that we heard from our panelists here today. So thank you.